The melody was beautiful, but Eleanor recognized something far more dangerous hidden in the composition. As her student Anna played the piece her late father had written, Eleanor's trained eye caught the mathematical patterns concealed within the musical notes, coordinates, dates, and activation codes for sleeper agents that were never supposed to wake up. The girl had no idea she was playing a song that could restart the Cold War. Welcome to Hidden Legends. Before we begin this incredible story of a quiet piano teacher whose musical expertise once cracked the Soviet Union's most dangerous codes, tell me in the comments where you're watching from today. And if you believe that some secrets should stay buried, hit that subscribe button and share this story to help us honor those who protected us during our darkest hours. Eleanor Hartwell's piano studio occupied the sunlit corner of her Victorian home on Maple Street in suburban Portland, Oregon, where the morning light streamed through lace curtains and illuminated decades of student recital photographs covering the walls. At 73, Eleanor had been teaching piano for 35 years, building a reputation as the area's most patient and skilled instructor for students ranging from 5-year-old beginners to adult learners pursuing lifelong dreams. Her teaching method was old-fashioned but effective. Proper posture, disciplined practice, and deep appreciation for classical composers who had created timeless beauty from mathematical precision. Students learned Bach's intricate counterpoint, Mozart's elegant structures, and Chopin's emotional complexity under Eleanor's gentle but exacting guidance. Parents trusted her completely, knowing their children would receive not just musical education, but lessons in dedication, patience, and artistic expression. What they didn't know was that Eleanor's ability to recognize patterns in musical compositions had been developed during 25 years of breaking Soviet encryption codes for the National Security Agency, where she had been one of America's most effective cryptographers during the height of the Cold War. Her ear for mathematical relationships hidden within seemingly innocent information had helped prevent nuclear incidents, exposed spy networks, and saved countless American lives during an era when the wrong decoded message could have triggered global catastrophe. Eleanor had retired from government service in 1995, trading classified briefings for student recitals and choosing to build a peaceful life, surrounded by music rather than the constant tension of international espionage. Her NSA background was deeply classified. Her contributions to national security were never publicly acknowledged, and her transition to civilian life had been so complete that even her closest friends had no idea about her former profession. This Tuesday morning in November started like any other. Eleanor prepared her studio for the day's lessons, arranging sheet music and adjusting the bench height for her first student, Anna Kozlov, a remarkably talented 16-year-old who had been studying with Eleanor for 3 years. Anna possessed natural musical ability that exceeded most students twice her age, with technical precision and emotional depth that suggested potential for professional performance if she chose to pursue advanced training. "Good morning, Mrs. Hartwell," Anna said as she entered the studio, carrying her music bag and moving with the quiet confidence of someone comfortable in this familiar space. "I've been practicing the Chopin piece you assigned, and I think I finally have the left-hand passages worked out." "Wonderful, dear," Eleanor replied, settling at the second piano she used for accompaniment and instruction. "But first, I'd like to hear that composition your father wrote. You mentioned last week that you'd found more of his manuscripts in your mother's music collection." Anna's expression grew slightly melancholy, as it always did when discussing her father, who had died in a car accident when she was 12. "I found this piece in a box of his personal things. It's different from his other compositions, more complex, almost like he was trying to hide something in the music itself." She placed the handwritten manuscript on the piano's music stand, and Eleanor immediately noticed the distinctive characteristics of professional composition: precise notation, complex harmonic structures, and unusual mathematical relationships between the melodic lines that suggested advanced training in music theory. Anna's father had clearly been far more than the amateur composer Eleanor had assumed him to be. "It's called Memories of Moscow," Anna explained as she positioned her hands on the keyboard. "I think he wrote it about his childhood in Russia before his family immigrated to America." As Anna began to play, Eleanor felt the familiar pleasure of hearing beautiful music performed with skill and emotional understanding. The melody was haunting, with Russian folk influences woven through sophisticated harmonic progressions that demonstrated impressive compositional technique. But as Eleanor listened more carefully, something about the mathematical structure of the piece began triggering recognition patterns she hadn't accessed in nearly 30 years. The intervals between certain notes weren't chosen for musical reasons. They represented numerical relationships that Eleanor's cryptographic training recognized as significant. The rhythmic patterns in the left hand corresponded to coordinates that could indicate geographic locations. Most troubling, the progression of key changes followed a sequence that Eleanor remembered from classified briefings about Soviet communication protocols used for activating deep cover operatives. As Anna continued playing, Eleanor's trained mind began automatically analyzing the composition as if it were an encrypted message rather than a piece of music. What she discovered made her blood run cold with recognition and terror. Eleanor forced herself to maintain her normal teaching demeanor while Anna finished the piece, but her mind was racing through analytical processes she hadn't used since her retirement from the NSA. The composition wasn't just hiding mathematical patterns. It was a sophisticated encryption system that used musical notation to conceal operational intelligence that could have catastrophic implications if it fell into the wrong hands. "That was beautifully played, Anna," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she had just heard. "Your father was clearly a gifted composer. Tell me, do you know anything about his musical training or background in Russia?" "Not really," Anna replied, closing the manuscript carefully. "My mother doesn't like talking about their life before they came to America. She says it brings back too many painful memories of the family they left behind." Eleanor nodded understandingly, but her cryptographic analysis was continuing in the background of their conversation. The piece contained geographic coordinates that corresponded to locations in Washington, D.C., New York, and Los Angeles, major American cities that would be logical targets for covert operations. The rhythmic patterns encoded dates that fell within the current calendar year, suggesting operational timelines that were still active rather than historical intelligence. Most alarming, the harmonic progressions contained what Eleanor recognized as activation sequences, coded instructions that could be used to wake up sleeper agents who had been placed in American society years or decades earlier and were waiting for specific signals to begin their assigned missions. Anna's father hadn't just been a composer. He had been a Soviet intelligence officer who had embedded operational codes in music that his daughter was now innocently learning to play. "Anna, I'm curious about something," Eleanor said, trying to keep her tone casual while gathering intelligence that could be vital to national security. "Has anyone else heard you play this piece? Any other musicians or teachers who might have commented on your father's compositional style?" "Just my mother and my piano teacher before you, Mrs. Chun. But Mrs. Chun moved back to China 2 years ago, so you're the only person who's really listened to it carefully." Eleanor felt a chill of recognition. Mrs. Chen's sudden departure to China, combined with her specific interest in Anna's father's compositions, suggested possible intelligence connections that could mean the coded information was already being transmitted to foreign operatives. The network of people who understood the true significance of these musical codes might be larger and more active than Eleanor had initially realized. "Has your mother mentioned whether your father left any other compositions? Perhaps pieces with similar complexity or unusual mathematical structures?" Anna brightened with enthusiasm. "Actually, yes. There's a whole box of his manuscripts that we haven't gone through yet. My mother keeps saying we should organize them and maybe even publish some of his work. She thinks it would be a nice way to honor his memory." The implications hit Eleanor with devastating clarity. If there were multiple compositions containing encrypted intelligence, and if Anna's mother was planning to make them publicly available, it could trigger a cascade of covert operations that had been dormant for decades. Sleeper agents across the country could receive activation instructions through sheet music that appeared to be nothing more than touching tributes to a deceased amateur composer. Eleanor needed to examine those manuscripts immediately, but she also needed to do so without alarming Anna or her mother about the true nature of their discovery. More critically, she needed to determine whether the intelligence embedded in these compositions represented historical curiosities or active threats that required immediate federal intervention. "That sounds like a wonderful project," Eleanor said, her mind already developing plans for gaining access to the complete collection. "I'd be happy to help evaluate your father's work from a musical perspective. Perhaps I could come by this weekend and take a look at what you found." "That would be amazing. My mother would love to meet you, and I know she'd appreciate your professional opinion about which pieces might be worth preserving." As Anna packed up her music and prepared to leave, Eleanor realized she was facing the most dangerous situation of her entire career in intelligence. The young woman sitting in her piano studio was unknowingly carrying operational codes that could activate Soviet agents, trigger terrorist attacks, or compromise American national security in ways that could cost thousands of lives. But Eleanor also knew that Anna was completely innocent, a talented teenager who loved music and wanted to honor her father's memory. Any federal response that treated Anna as a security threat rather than a victim would destroy an innocent life, while potentially driving the real dangers deeper underground, where they would be impossible to track and neutralize. Eleanor's challenge was protecting both Anna and American national security, while unraveling a conspiracy that had been hidden in plain sight for over 2 decades. That evening, Eleanor sat in her home office, surrounded by reference materials she hadn't accessed in nearly 30 years. Classified manuals on Soviet encryption techniques, mathematical analysis tools, and contact information for former NSA colleagues who might still have security clearances sufficient to handle the intelligence she had discovered. The transition from retired piano teacher to active cryptographer felt both familiar and terrifying, like returning to a battlefield she had hoped never to see again. Using techniques she had developed during her government career, Eleanor began a systematic analysis of the musical composition Anna had played. Each note was assigned numerical values based on its position, duration, and harmonic relationship to surrounding passages. The mathematical patterns that emerged confirmed her initial assessment. This was definitely a sophisticated encryption system that used musical notation to conceal operational intelligence. The geographic coordinates hidden in the rhythmic patterns corresponded to government buildings, military installations, and infrastructure targets in major American cities. The dates encoded in the melodic progressions fell within a 3-month window starting in December, just 5 weeks away. Most disturbing, the activation sequences embedded in the harmonic structure matched protocols that Eleanor remembered from classified briefings about Soviet sleeper agent networks that were supposed to have been rolled up at the end of the Cold War. But Eleanor's analysis also revealed something that made the situation even more complex and dangerous. The encryption methods used in Anna's father's composition were too sophisticated for a typical intelligence operative. They demonstrated knowledge of advanced cryptographic techniques that were closely guarded state secrets, accessible only to the highest levels of Soviet intelligence hierarchy. Anna's father hadn't just been a spy. He had been a senior intelligence officer with access to operational methods that could compromise American national security even decades after the Soviet Union's collapse. Eleanor needed to contact her former colleagues at the NSA, But she also needed to do so without triggering security protocols that would result in federal agents storming Anna's home and treating an innocent teenager as an enemy of the state. The situation required delicate handling that balanced national security concerns with protection of civilians who had become unknowingly involved in intelligence operations. Her first call was to David Chun, her former supervisor at the NSA, who had transitioned to a consulting position with the Department of Homeland Security after his own retirement from government service. David's security clearance remained active, and his experience with Soviet intelligence operations made him the ideal person to evaluate Eleanor's discovery and coordinate an appropriate federal response. "Eleanor Hartwell," David said when he answered a secure phone line, his voice carrying surprise and professional interest. "It's been what, 8 years since we last spoke? Please tell me this is a social call and not something that's going to ruin my peaceful retirement." "I wish it were social, David," Eleanor replied, knowing that her former colleague would immediately recognize the seriousness in her tone. "I've stumbled across something that requires your expertise and possibly immediate federal attention." Eleanor provided a comprehensive briefing about Anna's composition, her preliminary cryptographic analysis, and the potential implications if her assessment was correct. David listened without interruption, occasionally asking technical questions that confirmed he understood both the intelligence significance and the operational complexities of the situation. "Jesus, Eleanor," David said when she finished her briefing, "if you're right about this, we're looking at a potential sleeper agent network that's been dormant since the Cold War, but could still be activated using these musical codes. That's a threat level that requires immediate investigation by multiple federal agencies. But we also need to consider that Anna and her mother are completely innocent victims who have no idea they're involved in intelligence operations," Eleanor pointed out. "Any response that treats them as hostile assets rather than cooperating witnesses could destroy their lives while driving the real threats underground." David was quiet for several minutes, processing the tactical challenges that Eleanor's discovery represented. "Eleanor, I need to bring this to federal attention immediately, but I can also ensure that the response protects the civilians involved. Can you maintain your normal relationship with Anna while we develop a comprehensive investigation plan?" "Yes, but there's another complication. Anna mentioned that her mother wants to publish her father's complete works, and there's apparently a whole collection of manuscripts that we haven't examined yet. If there are multiple compositions containing operational codes, and if they become publicly available, it could trigger activation sequences for agents across the country. That changes everything. We need to examine those manuscripts immediately, and we need to do it before they're shared with anyone else who might understand their true significance." Over the next 2 hours, David coordinated with FBI counterintelligence specialists, NSA cryptographers, and Department of Homeland Security analysts to develop a response plan that would protect both Anna's family and American national security. The plan required Eleanor to maintain her cover as an ordinary piano teacher while serving as the primary intelligence asset for a federal investigation that could expose one of the most dangerous espionage operations in American history. Eleanor's weekend visit to examine Anna's father's manuscripts would be supported by covert surveillance teams and technical specialists who could analyze the compositions for additional encrypted intelligence. But the success of the operation would depend on Eleanor's ability to gather vital information without alerting Anna's mother to the true nature of their interest in the musical collection. The stakes couldn't be higher, and Eleanor realized that her quiet retirement had just ended permanently. Saturday morning arrived with November's crisp clarity as Eleanor drove through Anna's neighborhood, noting details that her intelligence training made automatic: escape routes, surveillance positions, and tactical considerations that could become important if the situation became dangerous. Her visit was ostensibly social, a piano teacher meeting her student's family, and offering professional advice about preserving a deceased composer's work. In reality, she was conducting one of the most sensitive intelligence operations of her career. Anna's house was a modest two-story colonial in a quiet residential area, the kind of neighborhood where families raised children and neighbors knew each other's names. Nothing about the exterior suggested connections to international espionage or covert operations. But Eleanor's experience had taught her that the most dangerous secrets were often hidden behind the most ordinary facades. Mrs. Hartwell. Anna opened the front door with obvious excitement. "I'm so glad you could come. My mother is really looking forward to meeting you, and we've got all of my father's manuscripts spread out in the living room." Eleanor followed Anna inside, automatically noting the home's layout, security features, and potential tactical significance, while maintaining the warm demeanor of a friendly piano teacher visiting her student's family. The interior was comfortable and welcoming, filled with photographs, books, and the accumulated memories of a family that had built a successful American life. "You must be Eleanor," said a woman emerging from the kitchen, her slight accent and elegant bearing immediately confirming Eleanor's assessment that Anna's family had European origins. "I'm Natasha Kozlov, Anna's mother. Thank you so much for taking an interest in my husband's music. It means more than you know." Eleanor shook hands with Natasha, using the contact to assess details that could be intelligence relevant. Calloused fingers that suggested manual work or possibly weapons training, observational habits that indicated security consciousness, and subtle tension that might reflect awareness of potential threats. Natasha appeared to be exactly what she claimed, a widow honoring her husband's memory. But Eleanor's training demanded careful evaluation of every detail. "Anna is one of my most talented students," Eleanor replied, settling into the living room, where dozens of handwritten musical manuscripts were arranged across multiple tables. When she mentioned her father's compositions, I was genuinely curious to see his work from a professional perspective. The collection was extensive and impressive. Symphonic works, chamber pieces, piano solos, and collaborative compositions that demonstrated sophisticated understanding of classical forms and contemporary techniques. But as Eleanor began examining the manuscripts, her cryptographic training immediately recognized patterns that confirmed her worst fears. Multiple compositions contained the same encryption techniques she had identified in memories of Moscow. Geographic coordinates were embedded in rhythmic structures, operational timelines were concealed within melodic progressions, and activation sequences were hidden in harmonic relationships that would be invisible to anyone without advanced training in both music theory and intelligence analysis. "Your husband was remarkably talented," Eleanor said, studying a piano concerto that contained what appeared to be detailed intelligence about American military installations. His technical knowledge of composition was quite advanced. Where did he receive his musical training? Natasha's expression grew slightly guarded, a reaction that Eleanor's training recognized as significant. He studied at the Moscow Conservatory before we immigrated to America. But he always said his real education came from life experiences that were too painful to discuss in detail. Eleanor nodded understandingly while continuing her analysis of the manuscripts. The Moscow Conservatory was known for producing exceptional musicians, but it had also been used as cover for training intelligence operatives in skills that could be useful for covert operations. Dmitry Kozlov's musical education had probably included cryptographic techniques that allowed him to embed operational intelligence in compositions that appeared to be nothing more than artistic expressions. "Some of these pieces are quite complex," Eleanor observed, examining a string quartet that contained activation codes for what appeared to be multiple sleeper agents. "Has anyone else looked at this collection? Other musicians or scholars who might have commented on his compositional techniques?" "Just Anna's previous piano teacher, Mrs. Chun, and a musicologist from the university who was interested in immigrant composers. but they both said the work was too advanced for their expertise and suggested we find someone with more specialized knowledge. Eleanor felt another chill of recognition. The fact that other people had examined these manuscripts meant that the encrypted intelligence might already be in circulation among individuals who understood its true significance. The network of people aware of Dmitry Kozlov's hidden activities could be larger and more dangerous than initially assumed. Anna mentioned that you are considering publishing some of this work, Eleanor said, her tone carefully casual, while gathering information that could be vital to national security. That's a wonderful way to honor his memory. Have you made any specific plans about which pieces to include? We've been thinking about starting with his piano works, since Anna can perform them and help people understand their musical value. There's a small music publisher in Seattle who's expressed interest in creating a memorial collection. The implications were staggering. If Dmitry Kozlov's encrypted compositions were published and distributed, they could trigger activation sequences for sleeper agents across the country while providing operational intelligence to foreign adversaries who might still be monitoring American activities. Eleanor needed to prevent publication without alerting Natasha to the true nature of her concerns. As the afternoon continued, Eleanor systematically examined the entire collection while maintaining casual conversation about musical techniques and compositional methods. By the time she prepared to leave, she had identified at least 15 compositions containing encrypted intelligence that represented immediate threats to American national security. But she had also confirmed that both Anna and Natasha were completely innocent victims who had no understanding of the dangerous information they possessed. Her challenge now was protecting them while ensuring that Dmitry Kozlov's hidden legacy couldn't be used to harm the country that had given his family sanctuary and opportunity. Sunday evening brought Eleanor together with a team of federal specialists in a secure conference room at the Portland FBI field office, where her preliminary intelligence about Dmitry Kozlov's encrypted compositions had triggered one of the most significant counterintelligence investigations in recent memory. The meeting included FBI counterespionage agents, NSA cryptographers, Department of Homeland Security analysts, and officials from agencies whose names Eleanor wasn't cleared to know. "Mrs. Hartwell," said Special Agent Sarah Martinez, the FBI's lead investigator for the case, "your discovery represents the first confirmed evidence of an active Soviet sleeper network that survived the end of the Cold War. The intelligence embedded in these compositions could expose American national security vulnerabilities that we didn't even know existed." Eleanor nodded, understanding the magnitude of what her weekend visit had uncovered. But we also need to remember that Anna and her mother are innocent civilians who are completely unaware of the significance of what they possess. Any response that treats them as hostile assets rather than cooperating witnesses could destroy their lives while driving real threats underground. "Agreed," Agent Martinez replied, "which is why we need your continued cooperation to resolve the situation without compromising either national security or the safety of the Kozlov family. Are you prepared to maintain your cover as Anna's piano teacher while assisting with the comprehensive federal investigation?" Eleanor had spent the previous evening considering exactly this question, weighing her obligations to her former profession against her desire to maintain the peaceful civilian life she had built over the past 28 years. But the discovery of active intelligence, threats hidden in musical compositions, had made the decision inevitable. "Yes," Eleanor said simply, "but I want assurances that Anna and Natasha will be protected throughout this process, and that their cooperation will not result in their being treated as criminals or security risks." "You have those assurances," Agent Martinez confirmed. "Our primary objectives are neutralizing the intelligence threats and identifying any active operatives who might be connected to Dmitry Kozlov's network. The family's cooperation is essential to both goals." The federal response plan that emerged from their discussion required Eleanor to deepen her relationship with the Kozlov family, while gathering additional intelligence about Dmitri's background, connections, and possible operational activities during his years in America. NSA analysts would conduct comprehensive cryptographic analysis of all compositions in the collection, while FBI investigators would examine Dmitri's immigration history, employment records, and social connections for evidence of intelligence activities. Most critically, the investigation would attempt to identify and locate any sleeper agents who might still be active and could potentially be activated by the codes hidden in Dmitri's compositions. The geographic coordinates, operational timelines, and activation sequences embedded in the music represented a roadmap to covert operatives who had been placed in American society decades earlier and were waiting for instructions that could still arrive through seemingly innocent musical performances. "There's one more complication we need to address," Eleanor told the assembled federal agents. Natasha mentioned that a musicologist from the university has examined the collection, and Anna's previous piano teacher expressed specific interest in Dmitri's compositional techniques. "We need to determine whether those individuals understood the true significance of what they were seeing." Agent Martinez made notes about additional investigative leads that would need to be pursued immediately. "We'll conduct background investigations on anyone who has had access to the manuscripts. If there are foreign intelligence assets involved in this network, we need to identify them before they can warn their operatives about our investigation." The meeting concluded with Eleanor receiving specialized communication equipment that would allow her to maintain secure contact with the federal investigation team while continuing her normal interactions with Anna and her family. Her piano teaching would provide perfect cover for regular visits to the Kozlov home, while her musical expertise would give her credible reasons for asking detailed questions about Dmitri's compositions and background. But Eleanor also understood that she was walking into one of the most dangerous situations of her intelligence career. If Dmitri's network included active operatives who were monitoring his family for signs of security breaches, Eleanor's investigation could trigger responses that would threaten not only her own safety, but also the lives of Anna and Natasha. The stakes had never been higher, and Eleanor realized that her transition from retired cryptographer to active federal asset would require all the skills she had developed during 25 years of protecting American national security during the Cold War's most dangerous period. 3 weeks into the federal investigation, Eleanor's carefully maintained double life as piano teacher and intelligence operative reached its inevitable crisis point. Her regular visits to the Kozlov home had yielded a comprehensive understanding of Dmitri's encrypted legacy. Over 40 compositions containing operational intelligence for a network of Soviet sleeper agents that remained active throughout the United States, with activation sequences that could be triggered through public musical performances. The investigation had also revealed that Dmitri Kozlov had been far more than a simple intelligence operative. He had been a senior officer in the GRU, Soviet military intelligence, responsible for establishing and maintaining deep cover networks that were designed to survive the collapse of the Soviet Union and continue operating under new Russian intelligence services. His immigration to America hadn't been an escape from Soviet control. It had been a carefully planned insertion that positioned him to coordinate American operations while raising a family that provided perfect cover for his continued intelligence activities. But Tuesday evening's piano lesson brought the discovery that changed everything. Anna had prepared a new piece from her father's collection, a haunting composition titled American Dreams that she wanted to perform at her high school's winter concert. As Eleanor listened to Anna play the piece, her trained ear caught encryption patterns that made her blood run cold with recognition and terror. The composition contained activation codes for immediate operations targeting government buildings in Washington, D.C., with coordinate systems that corresponded to the White House, Pentagon, and congressional facilities. The timeline embedded in the melodic structure indicated December 15th, less than 3 weeks away. Most alarming, the harmonic progressions contained what Eleanor recognized as authentication sequences that would confirm to sleeper agents that their activation orders were legitimate and should be executed immediately. Anna was unknowingly preparing to perform a musical composition that would trigger terrorist attacks on the highest levels of American government. "Anna," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she had just discovered. "This piece is quite complex. Has anyone else heard you practice it? Any other musicians or teachers who might be familiar with your father's work?" "Actually, yes," Anna replied enthusiastically. "Mrs. Chun came by last weekend. She's back from China for a few months and wanted to see how my playing has developed. She was really interested in this piece and asked if she could get a copy of the sheet music." Eleanor felt the pieces of the conspiracy falling into place with devastating clarity. Mrs. Chun hadn't moved to China for personal reasons. She had returned to coordinate with foreign intelligence services that were still monitoring Dmitri's network and waiting for opportunities to activate his embedded operational codes. Her interest in Anna's father's compositions wasn't musical appreciation. It was intelligence gathering designed to identify which pieces contained encryption that could still be used for covert operations. "Did Mrs. Chen mention anything specific about your father's compositional techniques?" Eleanor asked, trying to gather information while maintaining her cover as an ordinary piano teacher asking casual questions. She said his work reminded her of composers who embedded mathematical patterns in their music, and she thought other people would be very interested in studying his methods. She even offered to help us publish the collection through contacts she has in international music circles. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Mrs. Chun was coordinating the publication and distribution of Dmitri's compositions as a way of triggering activation sequences for multiple sleeper agents while providing operational intelligence to foreign adversaries. Anna's innocent desire to honor her father's memory was being manipulated to launch the most dangerous intelligence operation since the Cold War. Eleanor excused herself to use the restroom, where she activated the emergency communication device that connected her directly to Agent Martinez's command center. "This is Nightingale," she said, using the code name that identified her as an active federal asset. "We have an immediate national security emergency. Anna is preparing to perform activation codes for terrorist attacks on government targets in Washington, D.C. Timeline is December 15th, and we have confirmation that foreign intelligence assets are coordinating the operation." Agent Martinez's response was immediate and decisive. "Nightingale, maintain your position and keep the family calm. Federal response teams are moving to your location immediately. We're initiating emergency protocols to locate and neutralize all potential targets." Eleanor returned to the piano studio, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether Anna's innocent musical performance would trigger a catastrophic attack on American government or whether decades of hidden conspiracy could be prevented by the skills she had hoped never to use again. "Anna," Eleanor said gently, "I need you to listen very carefully. Your father's compositions contain more than just beautiful music. They contain information that some people want to use to hurt innocent Americans. I used to work for the government helping to protect our country from exactly these kinds of dangers, and right now, I need your help to make sure that doesn't happen." Anna's expression shifted from confusion to understanding to fear as Eleanor explained the truth about her father's background and the dangerous legacy hidden in his musical compositions. But when federal agents arrived to secure the location and begin the process of neutralizing the intelligence threats, Anna made the choice that her father would have been proud of. She chose to protect America rather than the country that had sent him to betray it. The investigation that followed exposed and dismantled a network of sleeper agents that had been operating in American society for over 30 years, prevented terrorist attacks that could have killed hundreds of people, and demonstrated that the Cold War's most dangerous secrets were still capable of threatening American national security decades after the Soviet Union's collapse. Eleanor returned to her quiet life as a piano teacher, but she never forgot the lesson that Anna's courage had taught her. Sometimes the most important battles for freedom are fought by ordinary people who choose to do what's right regardless of the personal cost. Anna continued her piano studies, but she never again played her father's compositions. Some melodies she had learned were too dangerous to share with the world. The sheet music was destroyed, the federal investigation remained classified, and Eleanor's role in preventing a national catastrophe was never publicly acknowledged. But in the quiet moments between piano lessons, Eleanor sometimes remembered the morning when beautiful music nearly triggered the end of American democracy, and she felt grateful that her skills had been available when her country needed them most. Some secrets should stay buried, but some guardians never truly retire from protecting the innocent from dangers they can't see coming. Eleanor Hartwell understood both truths better than anyone, and she carried them with the same quiet dignity that had made her one of America's most effective protectors during the Cold War's darkest hours.